going on, everybody? Thanks for tuning into the first episode of the Simple Dad podcast, the first of many. I am your host, Quincy Forte, and I'm joined by Remon of the Urban Advocate, my brother. What's up,
What
Ramon?
up? What up? What up? What up? What's happening?
What's good? Um, so this being the first episode, you might notice some bumps in the road, but we're just gonna get better, better with time, right? Um, so yeah, welcome to Simple Dad. What's been going on with you, bro?
Oh man, I can't call it, man. I've been kind of cooped up in the house for like the last 3, 4 weeks. So, but other than that, man, I'm good. How about yourself?
Ah, man, I'm good. The same, cooped up in the house for sure. And for those who are tuning in, right, obviously, whether you're catching this later or you're catching this real time, we say cooped up because this is the kind of the pinnacle, the peak of the coronavirus of 2019, shutting down all of 2020 for everybody.
Yeah, quarantine 2020.
Quarantine 2020, canceling beach bodies for 2020. Any vacation plans that you had,
Yeah,
any six packs that you were trying to build are canceled, and everybody's eating cakes, cookies, and brownies.
yeah, pretty much.
Oh yeah, no. So man, it's funny because like as we're sort of um, we're getting ready. There's a bunch of technical difficulties before we actually got started in recording, right? I'm sitting here, and the with the quarantine, we're supposed to have social distancing, right? Everybody's supposed to be at the house,
Hmm.
chilling, and we have these neighbors across the street that are pretty much like biker people, right? And they have people over, um, and so I've turned into the old man to where I walk outside and I'm like the crotchety old man where I'm like, they are not social distancing. There's too many people in that garage. They're gonna get the corona. So it's just hilarious, man. But like as we're like getting on here, right? I hear motorcycles, just partying, and everybody's being jovial. There's probably libations being had, and the whole thing. I'm thinking, and sitting in here, it's like these people are not social distancing. I don't think they understand
I
at
don't
all
think they
what's going
understand
on.
what we're supposed to be doing here, man.
Right.
Yeah,
And
I
I,
mean, it's funny because like I've been kind of scrolling through social media a little bit, and I've been seeing people still going out partying, celebrating their birthday. I'm like, what are you doing?
I mean, so why what, let's talk about that. So why do you think that is though? Like, is it because people don't understand, or is it because people, uh, don't like the lack of freedom of choice?
I think it's a little bit of both. I don't think people uh like completely understand the gravity of the situation right now. You know what I mean? This is new for everybody. You know what I mean? I don't think anybody's ever had to experience anything like this. And
Hmm.
then at the same time, it's kind of like, because like one of the posts that I saw, it was like this girl, it was like her birthday. So I don't think she's ever had to go a year without celebrating her birthday. So she's like, man, forget this. I'm going to get out and have a good time. But it's like, again, it's a new situation for everybody. And I don't think they're used to it. I think they're used to having their freedom. So they're going to get out and try to enjoy it the best way they can.
And it's so interesting though because I was listening to another podcast and they were talking kind of about like how the idea of like there are people who can obviously sit with themselves and kind of be
Hmm.
alone and have these
Hmm.
thoughts or whatever. But then there's these people who are essentially like stunting and
Hmm.
trying to be like, I'm balling. I want you to see me. The whole phrase like, you see it, you see me, you see me. But during this time, nobody sees you, and
Right.
so if you were doing the most for extrinsic sort of motivation and gratitude and
Hmm.
just envy. Now nobody's seeing it. So what fulfillment do you get, right? Like the birthday
Hmm.
parties, the bottle service. I want people to see me in the club, but the club's closed
Hmm.
down. So
Hmm.
now nobody sees you.
Hmm.
So it's just interesting. But then also, so with the like the nobody seeing you, right? I was actually talking to a friend, and they were talking about how sort of even like the idea of like celebrity content, right? Like
Mm,
because now, like the reason we're doing this podcast, like, and it's kind of something, there's a backstory that I've been wanting to do for a while, right?
mm,
Um, but now seeing that everybody's on the same level, I texted you and was like, bro, this is the time to do it because everybody has Zoom, everybody has the
right,
same sound quality, and
right,
everybody is like you see people's houses, like their bookshelves in their house, right? It's like we're all on the same stage. CNN to
right,
dude in his wife's
right,
office is all in the same. We all have the same sound quality, and so it's kind of like the idea of celebrity.
right.
You kind of see through it at this point because
Mm-hmm.
it's like, hey, I'm like you. You're sitting in your living
Mm-hmm.
room. I'm stuck in my living room.
Yeah, it's definitely like the playing field is leveled out. You know what I mean? Like everybody's kind of on the same level. Don't really matter what, like you said, what platform you got. Don't really matter how big of a following you got. Everybody's kind of resorting to the same thing to kind of get their content out. So I mean, it's the perfect time for, like, I knew going into this whole quarantine, like I was like, yo, this is like the perfect time for content creators
Hmm.
because most everybody's kind of stuck in the house. You know what I mean? And like people are looking for stuff to consume and looking for stuff to kind of help pass the time and try to keep some kind of normalcy going on. So I knew this was going to be like a good time for people to start podcasts, and for people, if you got like content stacked up that you've been looking to get out, this is the perfect time to get it out.
Well, so that's an interesting point. So where do you see sort of after this, like as everybody's sort of scrambling to come out of this, like wiping the sleep from your eyes, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
actually, um, I think it's still going to be a slow ramp up, but like, what do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Like as far as coming out of this, like there's going to be and my prediction is there's going to be a slew of new like creators and people who find their sort of potential in this time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and those people are going to rise, possibly, and maybe overthrow some of the stuff that's already out there because they've been harvesting this for a while and just we're waiting on kind of the right time to pop. So, what do you think?
I definitely think it's going to be um, a lot more, a lot more voices out there. People, like you said, like you've been sitting on this idea for a while now, and um, it's a lot of people I'm pretty sure have been sitting around like, man, I've been thinking about starting a podcast and thinking about doing this, and this whole quarantine has kind of forced people into a situation where it's like, well, I'm not doing anything now, so let me go ahead and do it. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? So I think coming out of it, I definitely think it's going to be a lot more voices, a lot more um, people getting an opportunity to get their whatever it is they've been trying to get off the ground. And it's a lot more of an opportunity to get it out now. Coming out of it, I think it's just kind of like leveling out the playing field. Um,
Yeah. Right.
maybe some of the voices that were big going into this quarantine are not going to look as big coming out of it. You know what I mean? So I think we're going to see some people rise and we're going to see some people kind of fall through this.
Yeah, no, and especially like so I think it's hard like for like if you think of content creators, right? So I was like
Mm-hmm.
again listening to a different podcast, right? They were talking about they're comedians, right? So think about the
Mm-hmm.
shift that like comedians are having to make to be
Oh,
like I mean, because you have to react on a crowd and like you're
mm-hmm.
sitting here and I'm talking to you, right? So I don't get
Yeah,
that immediate feedback.
yeah.
So I think that'll be an interesting shift too. Musicians too. Like, I mean, now we're used to, and I think it's maddening, me as a musician, because like when I'm playing, right, I look out into a crowd, but then now you see people who they don't have that interaction, they don't have that smile of confirmation that, oh man, I'm really digging that song, or like walking straight up to you
Mm-hmm.
after you play a song and being like,
Right.
yo, I'm gonna give you an extra $20 because that's my jam.
Right,
I can't believe you played that song tonight. And now
right.
it's like you're playing the song to a
And
computer screen, and you turn off the computer screen, and you're like, man, I'm still in my living room.
man, yeah, and you know me, like I work with a lot of stand-up comedians. Like we're
Yeah,
we're based here in Dallas. For anybody who may be watching this outside of Dallas, we're based here in Dallas, Texas, and I work with a lot of the stand-up comedians here. And I got a partner of mine. He's found a little bit of a way around it. You know what I mean? Like going live on like Facebook and things like that.
right.
So kind of utilizing the social media platforms. Thankfully, he has a few different, kind of talents. He's not just depending on um, uh, just stand up comedy. You know what I mean? He's a DJ. He raps. He sings. So he kind of he's multi talented. So it doesn't just have to depend on stand up comedy. But I think it's going to be interesting how some of my comedian buddies are going to handle this. And I think for some of them who have been so heavily dependent on stand up comedy, I think it's gonna kind of force them to get their social media game up because I think that's important as a stand up comedian in this day and time when you see people like DC Young Fly and Carlos Miller and people who have made a huge following and career building off of their social media platform.
But if you let the purists tell it, them ain't comedians. Them are social media stuff.
But and I agree, and that I think because I've worked with so many comedians, and I've been working with
Yeah,
comedians since like 2011. It's definitely, um, it's definitely an art and it's an art form. Stand up comedy is an art form. Social media is is edited. You know what I mean? Like you can look your best version of yourself. Like you can't lie once you get on stage in front of people. You know what I
yeah,
mean? As it's completely different from you know being able to do a video on your phone and edit it down and upload it. You know
yeah,
what I mean? You can't do that when you're standing in front of people for 5 minutes. You know what I mean? Like
yeah.
it's definitely an art form to it. But um, I think in order for you to be able to maintain in this day and time as a comedian, I think you need both, as well as being an artist, being a recording artist. Like you can't. You got some artists who do well on social media, but once you get them in front of an audience to perform, they can't deliver. You know what I mean? And vice
Yeah.
versa.
Yeah, yeah. No, and I mean, so you got to think of it as like anything, right? So like
Hmm.
a financial planner will tell you don't put all your egg the whole saying, don't put all your eggs in one basket, right? So
Hmm.
you can be a purist, but you have to also be able to diversify. Everybody tells you to be to be able to diversify your portfolio, and I mean, you kind of see it now with like the way the just the market, the economy is going right now.
Hmm.
Like if you don't have a diversified portfolio, it's going to be hard for a lot of people because
Hmm.
they, and me myself too, right? You put all your your backing into this one thing, right? Or maybe even two things where there's a third or fourth thing that could sustain you if you're willing to say, hey, I do have way more time than I thought. Like, I don't need to watch that extra 30-minute show or that extra hour show and stuff
Oh, I've
like
been
that. So,
struggling with that. I think, like I said, I'm in week what 3, maybe 4 of the quarantine,
yeah.
and I've definitely sat down and spent entire days binge watching a whole season of the shows.
But then you look back at the day and you're like, what did I do today?
Man, it just in the last few days or so, I've just finally started to like get back in the groove of being productive.
Right.
But for the first couple of weeks, I was definitely not being very productive at all.
Uh, yeah. So why don't we sort of dive into kind of like it ties into uh what we're talking about, right? So why don't we just dive into the topic? And so,
Mhm.
obviously, Simple Dad podcast. We are not experts here. I am not the end all be all opinion of parenting. I am just adding dialogue to my experiences as a father, as a black man. I'm a black man, I'm sure. But as a father,
I'm I'm black, y'all.
but as a father, right? Just kind of a positive experience, and Ramon, is here to sort of chime in on that dialogue based on his experiences. Um, as me and Ramon both had our father present, all throughout our life and still do, right? And so that's kind of just what we want to bring here is sort of insight. And so a lot of these stories that you guys are going to hear are based off of direct insight from my son, my up and coming, very opinionated daughter, who can't talk yet, but already grunts her demands to the world. And so yeah, so this comes from a conversation that I had with Andrew. Um, and me and Ashley were sitting kind of in the living room, and it's kind of been interesting explaining the whole idea of a pandemic, or this virus, and kind of um, putting into different buckets as to how is this different from like a cold, like people get sick all the time, or he's had the flu, and he's felt ill, but in having the flu, we've never had to shut his school down, or 3 or 4 people in his class have had the flu. Like we've never had um, to go through great lengths, right? And so, um, and in seeing this is the biggest event that he's ever experienced. It's the biggest event that I've ever had in our life. Maybe they were bigger, but we didn't have social media, we didn't have internet, and so we probably were in a pandemic. And the parents that we have, we were probably like, "Hey, let's just go and do whatever." Still, and so
Yeah, I think the closest thing we kind of experienced in this lifetime to anything like this might have been 9/11.
yeah,
But even with that, because we're here in Dallas, we've still kind of been able to kind of maneuver around. But it was definitely like the same kind of vibe where everything is kind of like, man, what's going on?
well, and I've seen, we've kind of lived through, like, so I would say 9/11 is the biggest, or one of the biggest that we've had. But then also, like, so even something on kind of like a smaller level, but you have the same idea of panic was like the Y2K thing, like the year
Y2K. Yeah.
2000, the world's gonna end. We're buying
Mm-hmm.
up everything. People are going
Um,
crazy.
and I think also Hurricane Katrina,
Mm,
because once that kind of hit, like we had like an influx of New Orleans. It was like everybody doing Magnolia Clap all of a sudden walking through
mm-hmm,
walking through downtown Dallas. So it was like we had like an influx of people moving into the city, not just here in Dallas but also in Houston. Um, and also there was like when everything kind of went down in 2008. That was another situation where you start to see like a bunch of people panicking. Like you try to go get some gas, and the line is around the corner just to
mm-hmm.
fill your tank up. So I mean, I think we've kind of lived through a few situations, but nothing like this. It hadn't been this big. I don't think.
Yeah, so that's absolutely right, right? So we have some sort of frame of reference, but for
Mm-hmm.
him, he's 6.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't have a frame of reference. And the question that kind of brought up this topic and brought up the idea for today's podcast was, um, like he asked why um, why we can't go outside, or why we can't go out and do our normal things, and also when will we be able to
Mm-hmm.
do our normal things? And so for us as a family, we're active, right? He does taekwondo, like he goes to school, he gets to see his friends.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we get to go to the store, even though he protests half the time that he doesn't want to go. He likes going into his favorite restaurants and sitting down and eating, or
Mm-hmm.
going to the Chick-fil-A playground and stuff like that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Chick-fil-A is not a sponsor of this podcast, but I would gladly accept some chicken nugget
Oh yeah.
sponsorship should they want to contribute. Um, but yeah, so it I, it's hard because like for things like that, like I don't have an answer, and it's hard um, to explain to him or even to try and rationalize with him. I mean, he gets it. He's a smart kid. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, he's the other day he was saying, if people would just stay at home, like we wouldn't get the virus spread. Like, if people would just do what they're supposed to do. And I'm like, buddy, you're 6 and you understand this. Like, um, uh, but it's very real, but it's kind of like I don't have those answers for him, and it's really hard, from my perspective as a parent to sort of just be like, I don't know, man, we just gotta.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, you know, because I'm not a parent, I'm a guy parent. I got what, three guy kids, I think, and and possibly four because we haven't discussed it, but I'm pretty sure I'm Marley's godfather as well.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
so I mean, I got a few guy children. I got friends of mine who got kids and everything like that. So I can, because like you said, we have some sort of frame of reference as it pertains to stuff like this. But I can only imagine trying to explain this to a child. Why, like you said, why you can't go here, why we can't go, why can't I go to school, why can't I do this, why can't I do that? And like I asked my brother Swab Burgundy,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
asked him because he has a his child is he has a daughter. I think she's four
Mm,
4 years old, and I asked him. I was like, so how is she curious about what's going on at all? And he's like, well, her normal like routine hasn't been disrupted too much, right?
mm,
Because her school, her little preschool, they're still allowing them. It's not like a big school anyway, so they're still kind of allowed to go there, just practicing social distancing, obviously while they're there. But you know,
wait,
it's
how do
not.
how do 4-year-olds are the
I don't
kings and queens of invading personal space? I'm not really sure how 4-year-olds are
know. I'm
practicing
not
social
sure.
distancing.
I'm not sure, but they found a way to work it out. You know what I mean? And I mean, it's most of the time she's at home. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But when she every once in a while he says she might ask about going to school or whatever and playing for a little while. And that it's cool to do that, but most of the time he just is like, man, look, I explained to her about hygiene and washing your hands and
Hmm.
making sure you kind of keep your social distancing or whatever like that. And she's kind of like Andrew. She's pretty bright especially for a 4-year-old. She's super advanced. So she kind of understands. And other than that, she's a happy child, happy go lucky child. But I can only imagine for some parents out there how this might be trying to explain, especially with smaller children,
Yeah.
how to explain something like this to them.
Well, and especially it's hard because as a parent, like you don't really understand it.
Mm-hmm.
Like we understand what's in the information that's coming into us, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so we try and disseminate and make that as clear as possible,
Mm-hmm.
without, I mean, while keeping it together, right? And so, like, what's that? You never let them see you sweat, right? So you're like sweating, like freaking out, all the
Mm-hmm.
things. but then try not to be too finicky and panicky, because that anxiety can go on to them as well, right? And so
Hmm.
you don't want them to be anxiety driven. You want them to sort of see uh, some sort of normalcy.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I think it's a balance because, like with our parents growing up, man, like it was some things going on, but our parents never really, they didn't really hide us from anything, but at the same time, they they never really let us like see them panicking and worrying and getting, freaking out about things like that. You know what I mean? They just kind of dealt with it. It was like, and they was always very honest with us and said,
mhm,
"Hey, this is going on, but we not gonna worry about it." And especially our mother. Uh, she's a Christian woman, so you know what I mean. She's like, "Look, we gonna leave this in God's hands. We gonna pray about it, and we not gonna let it trip us out." But they was always very calm and whatever was going on, and not let because like you said, children see you panicking, they're gonna start panicking. You know what I
mhm.
mean? As long as they know you're cool, they're cool.
Well, so here, and as you're talking about that, I just thought about something. I think it's the idea that, um, so as parents, most people, or they have like a kind of domineering sort of relationship,
Mm,
parent-child relationship. But if you think about it, it could be a possible threat to that dominance, right? Because
mm,
like, normally, we have all the answers. We can control situations and outcomes. But now this is one of those situations and outcomes that we don't have the answers.
mm,
And if you're one of those people who, kind of like we were talking about earlier, who you thrive on people seeing you, right? So it's that same kind of energy. You're like, hey, I have the answers, and I dominate. And it's sort of because I said so, and I know best and stuff like that. Now you don't
mm,
know best because you don't
mm,
really understand anything, and so
mm.
now you
Yeah,
have this person that you had like kind of almost like a stronghold over. Like, I make it sound like a hostage situation, but it's not. But it's kind of
yeah.
like that. You have years of experience, and this is nothing like anything you've seen in your years of experience, and so you don't have an answer.
And I can imagine because we live in the information era.
Yeah.
And one of the beautiful things about information is that it's so readily available. Though one of the downsides of it is that it's so much of it out there that you don't know what to believe.
Right.
So at this point, we're getting a lot of information, but some of it is misinformation. Some of it is the wrong information. So I can imagine trying to, because as a parent, it's your job to kind of guide your children through this life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And like you said, is most of the times you have the answers. This is one of those situations where you're trying to explain it to them while you're still trying to figure it out. You don't know exactly what's going on, so it's like,
Yeah.
when they ask you, it's like, what's going on? It's like, I don't know, but as soon as I know, you'll know.
It's like it's almost like putting together IKEA furniture. Like you have the instructions, and they're like, "Well, why are you putting it together like that?" I don't know. It's supposed to be a shelf. That's all I know is it's supposed to be a shelf, and I don't know why they have me put this piece here. It'll all make sense in the end. It's gonna be a bookshelf, but
Right.
I don't know. And it's kind of like that same frustration that you get like
Yeah.
in that process because you're
Hmm.
sweating trying to put this together, trying to hold it in an awkward position, right? And they're asking you, why does it look like that?
Right.
It doesn't look like the box. And you're like, you're
Yeah.
gonna see it. It doesn't look like the box yet.
Like it will.
Go play with your Legos. Oh man, yeah. So no, it's just like, I think it's a lot of things, but it's kind of like not having those answers, man, is extremely difficult.
and
Um,
then and then I want to ask you, man, like how because you have a brand new baby girl,
mm,
like and like so. I know it's got to be super like how does that feel like having to deal with that? Because on one hand, you got a 6 year old who's semi independent. He kind of do his own thing, but you have a baby girl that's kind of dependent on both you and your wife. So it's like how do you deal with that? Because you have to be extra careful so she doesn't, because she's still fragile.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like, how do you deal with that?
Well, no, that's definitely, I mean, we were already sort of germaphobes to begin with. Like
Mm-hmm.
as far as whenever she got here, like it's always still it's been wash your hands. Like so some of this
Mm-hmm.
stuff I'm like, you dirty people, y'all should be washing your hands anyway. Um,
Anyway,
but don't be sneezing on nothing and wiping your
right.
hand on the keypads. Like that's just common like hygiene, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't be picking your nose and stuff like that. And so it's kind of like we weren't the people so pardon me, like I'm not ageism at all. Um, but there's two types of people that like to walk up and run up on you without permission and kind of touch a baby in a stroller. That's kids with snotty hands, and it's old people,
Mm-hmm.
or older adults. I shouldn't say old people. That sounded very derogatory. But it's older adults who have lived all their life and they don't have to ask for permission to do anything. And they just
Right.
walk in, they're touching
Yeah.
your baby on the cheek.
Yeah.
Um, and Ashley is quick to be like, "Excuse me, what are you doing?" um, and so we've always been kind of like just, especially now with
Very
her, and it's
protective.
like, yeah, she's susceptible to anything. I mean, and
Right.
the wonders of mother's milk can
Mm-hmm.
only go so far, right? And so that's kind of one of the things that we've always done, and it's kind of just interesting to see that like so many people now are like, oh, you got to count to 30 when washing your hands, and I'm like, what were you doing before? Just sticking a little soap on it, and then being like, I'm done. Uh, yeah, so no, yeah, it's I mean that part is kind of unnerving a little bit just to know like but then at the same time it's kind of like with I mean still with Andrew, like we go and we'll pick him up food, and like the people, I'm a celebrity at all the restaurants that we frequent. They know me, they know the kids and all that stuff,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
so
Me too.
yeah, and so it's kind of like I'm in my mind like, oh man, that's a plastic bag. How long does a virus live on
Mm.
that plastic bag? Like, do I want him to touch the bag? But at the same time, I'm like, man, I'm turning into like, I understand like the concept. But at the same time, I don't want him to be like, oh, I can't touch anything because he's 6 or,
Mm.
she's
Mm.
however old, and however long this goes on, they're impressionable, right?
Mm.
So these impressions that you put on now are going to, like, this is the impressionable years, right? So it'll shape
Mm.
how they are in the future. And so I just don't want to sort of put that impression and then sort of ruin experience and, kind of life uh, for their formidable years. So
Mm.
I don't tell him, hey man, don't touch that bag yet. I haven't
Right.
Clorox wiped it down, or I haven't
Right.
hand. I mean, I'm just like, man, kind of have to, have a little bit of faith.
Mm.
So yeah, man. Um, so I was gonna say, let's just. So why don't we? Because I think we're running out of time. Why don't we just put a pin in that
Okay.
now, and we'll come back to it. Um, so yeah, pretty much this, like I said, we don't have the answers. It's just us trying to voice our opinion and give some insights on everything that's going on today. Our experiences as children, our experiences as my experience as a father, and then Ramon, your insight on it. So yeah, man, I think it's been a good first episode. How do you feel about it so far?
I'm loving it, man. Loving the format. Man, I think it's going to be a lot of really great discussions, especially, once things kind of get back to semi-normal.
Yeah,
It's going to be a lot of things to discuss. I mean, even, while things are, kind of on lockdown, I think there'll be a lot of great discussions coming out of this podcast. So I'm looking forward to it.
for sure, man. And I think it'll be awesome. Like we can get Shout out to shout out to Suave. We can get him on here and get some of his
Mm-hmm.
insights too.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's just been a lot. Like, so I mean, listening to different formats and medias and stuff like that, like you hear these people, um, and I kind of key into it a little bit to where they're giving like their father, or they've evolved into a particular point in their life, or some sort of self actualization based on their childhood experience. And how it shaped their life. And I'm like, man, that would be great to have those people on here to talk about those experiences.
Man, and like I was actually a friend of mine. He's a comedian. His name Comedian Q. Right now, um he's on a TV show called Love Goals
Mm-hmm.
on the OWN network with his fiance DJ Spinderella.
Right.
And this week's episode, they was actually talking about like how your childhood trauma affects, how
Mm-hmm.
you deal with relationships and things like that. And it was very interesting to see that because you got like five black males in this house.
Mm.
This is a therapy show. You
Okay.
got like five black males in this house, and only one of them had their father around when they was growing up. You know what I mean? And to see how that kind of played into not only how they deal with women, but how they, deal with their children as well. You know
Mm.
what I mean?
Yeah.
So to see how that plays out, how things that happen, especially by your father not being there, how that affects you as you get older. And I think one of the beautiful things about this generation is that we're able to kind of change that narrative, and you
Yeah.
start seeing a lot more fathers being active.
Yeah.
So um, being active and present, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? So I think there's a lot of, like I said, a lot of great discussions that can come out of this. I know a lot of great fathers who would love to participate in something like this because we're able to have those experiences and give, you know, some of the things that, the previous generation didn't come up with because of so many absentee fathers. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like we're able to kind of break that generational curse in some ways. So
For sure, man. Man, let's get them on here. Let's do it. That sounds
yes, sir.
fantastic. Let's have those conversations. Maybe we turn this into a no copyright infringement, or a red table talk type deal for fathers.
For fathers, right?
But cool, yeah. So this has been another your first episode of Simple Dad Podcast. We appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.